how well are you stewarding the things that God has given you? And what do you do when no one's watching? So there's a story in 1 Samuel chapter 25. It's about David and Nabal and Abigail. So we know who David is, and at the time he's on the run from Saul, who's king at the time. So David and his men have been charged with taking care of the property of a man named Nabal, and Nabal has a wife named Abigail. So when time comes for payment to be made to David and his men for the services of taking care of Nabal's property, Nabal refuses to pay. David gets so offended by Nabal's refusal to pay that he vows to take out all of Nabal's household. A servant from the household goes and he tells Abigail what happened and how, David is going to take out the household, and he tells Abigail, see what you can do because we're all going to die. Abigail decides to make an offering for David, so she gathers all these provisions and she sends it on ahead of her, and then she goes herself to basically try to make amends with David. And she gets there and she offers an apology. She says, my husband is foolish, like his name says, and please accept my apology. I didn't know, I wasn't there when any of this happened. However, let me be responsible for my husband's actions, and also take these supplies as an offering, and also my apologies for what happened. And so David forgives them, and he decides not to wipe out the household. Well, Abigail, she goes home and she finds that her husband is having a feast like nothing happened, and he's eating and he's drinking and he's drunk. And because he's drunk, she decides not to tell him what happened until the next day. So the next day she tells him, and I assume that he's so overcome with shock, maybe, that he has a stroke, and then he ends up passing away 10 days later. And so once David hears that Nabal has passed away, he sends a marriage proposal to Abigail, who then accepts, and she takes some of her property and her maids and all of that, and she goes and she lives with David as his wife. So the thing about it is that we don't know how many times Nabal's behavior had put their family in jeopardy or in some type of precarious situation, right? The Bible says that he had a reputation as a fool, and we have this account in 1 Samuel 25. But the thing about it is that God knows. We know that God saw Abigail's behavior. We know that God saw Nabal's behavior, and we saw, when it was time to be accountable, that Nabal didn't take accountability. When it was time to be accountable, it was Abigail who stepped up and ultimately saved her family and secured her destiny as queen. So it's so important that we have integrity, when no one's watching, but also because we know that God is always watching. And she could have had any number of reactions to what Nabal did, and ultimately she could have just decided not to do anything at all, right? But she decided to do the right thing, and it didn't matter who was watching, and she ultimately was the one who saved her household. It's kind of like a Queen Esther situation. God knew who would need to step up at the right time. And so, it just really calls into question how well, first of all, are we stewarding the things that we have? Again, her husband might have put them in a crazy situation many times. We don't know what we did. We know that she was faithful to the Lord. So, maybe she spent time in prayer that God would save her household over and over. We don't know. But we do know that she was faithful and that God was faithful to her. So with that, be encouraged. It's the matters of the heart, and also having integrity when we think that no one's watching, but we do know that someone is always watching. And if it's not anyone physically here, then we know that God sees everything that we do. So be encouraged. It's hard. It's the road less traveled, but we do know that God is always watching us. Have a blessed day.